Hey everybody, TacticAngel here, playing some World of Warships Legends on the PlayStation 5 actually. Today we'll be taking a look at the Shinonome, the Tier 5 premium Japanese destroyer. For this review we'll start with some history, talk about the ship in-game, discuss commanders, run down the stats with you, and then we'll finish off with some gameplay. If you do want to skip around at all though, there should be some time codes in the description to help you out. Development of the destroyer that would become the Fubuki class began shortly after the Washington Naval Treaty. Since destroyers were not counted in the overall tonnage allotted to the Japanese Navy, building large numbers of destroyers seemed like a reasonable thing to do, though it is safe to say that what would come to be understood as a large number would be redefined following Japan's invitation to the United States to enter the war. Since America would build more Fletcher-class destroyers than the total number of destroyers combined that served the Empire of Japan, the numbers game may not appear to be quite as evident in hindsight. The Fubuki class of ships was a follow-on to the Mitsuki class. In many ways, the ship marked a notable improvement over the Mitsuki. The extended forecastle, the raised deck at the front of the ship, improved its seaworthiness. All of the torpedo armaments were moved towards amidships, which helped even out its performance before and after firing its torpedoes. And for the first time, the Japanese mounted a 127mm gun to a destroyer. Though more popular with their crews than the earlier Japanese destroyers, the Fubukis shared the same sort of ubiquitous issues with light construction, stability, and from being relatively top-heavy, which might have made them somewhat liable to roll over and kill their entire crew. Hey, nobody's perfect. To help fight this problem, as well as the drop in speed that accompanied it, additional AA that was originally intended to be mounted was removed. Destroyers that lasted late into the war would see a series of equipment upgrades added back, plus even more anti-aircraft guns mounted in place of the raised rear turret. In total, depending on how you want to count the ships, there are either 10 or 24 ships of the Fubuki class. You might say 10 if you count only the original production run. You would say 24 if you count the 10 ships of the Ayanami subclass and the 4 ships of the Akatsuki subclass, which is the same Akatsuki that you're thinking of in-game. Indeed, all 3 iterations of this design are referred to as special type destroyers. As for where the Shinonome falls into this, she was the 4th ship in the original 10-ship run of the Fubuki class. Laid down in August 1926, launched in November 1927, she was commissioned into service in July of 1928. At the commencement of the Second Sino-Japanese War, she was part of the Second Fleet, patrolling the waters along the southern coast of China. Though not part of the Fourth Fleet incident, the incident there being that the fleet sailed into a typhoon which damaged just about every ship present, she would have been modernized in 1938 to try to improve the sturdiness of her design with the addition of 40 tons of structural reinforcement and ballast added to the ship to help her remain upright and not twist herself in half. And this was done to all special type destroyers around this time. By November 1941, she was headed from Kure, Japan, to Hainan to prepare for the opening of hostilities with just about everyone who wasn't Japan in the Pacific. So on December 8th, which was December 7th for the US, she was off the coast of southern Thailand. Here she would get her first taste of action, being close support for landing craft. She was strafed by Thai aircraft but suffered no damage. 8 days later though, she would not be quite so lucky. By this point, Destroyer Division 12, of which she was one of 3 members, were now off British Borneo. The invasion was somewhat hampered by weather, and the following morning, the battle would begin in earnest. Just about 10 minutes before 6 a.m., the Shinonome and the transport she was escorting, the Hyoshu Maru, were attacked by flying boats from the Dutch Royal Air Force. 5 bombs were dropped against Shinonome, 3 missed, 1 missing very close, but the other 2 struck the back of the ship and penetrated the rear munition storage. The destroyer would detonate shortly thereafter. She was observed to immediately come to a halt, then roll over, and within 5 minutes the Shinonome had sunk beneath the waves, taking all 221 members of her crew with her. The Shinonome is important historically for being the first ship that the Japanese Imperial Navy lost during World War II. she would precede every one of the original 10 Fubukis, all of which were sunk during World War II, along with most of the Japanese Navy, to be honest. In World of Warships, the Shinonome is relatively unsurprising. At her best, she resembles a Fubuki, and at her worst, she resembles a Fubuki with one arm tied behind its back. The short story is she's not a bad ship, or at least certainly nowhere near the worst Tier 5 premium out there, but she's inferior to the Fubuki in every way. Just with, at best, different torpedoes, and of course you do get the pleasure of paying to play her. Probably the most compelling reason why anyone would want this ship is because they simply have collected every other ship in the game. Maybe they want a Tier 5 premium Japanese destroyer, or they appreciate her place in history as the first Japanese warship sunk during the war, and so enjoys a certain pride of place among what would eventually be nearly the entire surface fleet. In game terms, the only reason why you might prefer this ship is her faster torpedo reload and the 4-knot advantage that those torpedoes have over the Fubuki herself. This little bit about stealthy torpedoes is not only not true, she has the most detectable torpedoes of any Tier 5 destroyer, and unless I've done something terribly wrong with the math, this gives her the longest reaction time for torpedoes at Tier 5. But beyond that, there are a lot of downsides to the ship versus the Fubuki herself. And one of those downsides is giving up more than 1,500 points of damage per torpedo, 2 kilometers worth of range, and every other difference between the Fubuki and Shinonome also creates unfavorable comparisons for the Shinonome, including glacial turret traverse, reduced maneuverability, and an anti-aircraft suite that is a total joke even among Japanese destroyers. So really the only thing driving people towards this ship should be a strong personal preference for exactly what these torpedoes offer, or something that isn't really game related. So as we come to commanders, I'm not sure how much of a choice you legitimately have here, because you don't have much of a choice in your second ability. The ship undoubtedly is a torpedo destroyer, and by just jumping into this boat, you've already sacrificed 2 kilometers worth of stealth torpedo range just by choosing this rather than the Fubuki. You probably are going to want to keep your detectability as low as possible with either Look at Me Now or Fragile Threat. Your legendary ability is probably going to need to be Unstoppable, because if you do get your engine or rudder taken out, it's pretty much game over in a ship that is this incapable of fighting its way out of anything but the most benign of trouble. Both Togo and Kurita offer you certain advantages. Togo in the form of the fastest reloading consumables, improved fire chance, and a physically faster ship, and Kurita offering you a way to improve your rate of fire and by having twist and track. I think in this case both of these commander options will definitely improve your fires per minute from being the worst at the tier to basically being below average. And twist and track makes your turrets noticeably faster, but even with that extra WD-40 provided by Kurita, your turrets rotate slower than the Fubuki's turrets under normal conditions. These are two commanders that also do come with torpedo options, but they'd easily take a backseat to arguably the best torpedo commander in the game. And that, of course, is Raizo Tanaka. In my opinion, the single most useful skill to making this ship more playable is Torpedo Safari. This is going to help you push your torpedo range past 9 kilometers when fully upgraded, and he also comes with 2 flavors of reducing torpedo reload time. I'd also argue that no matter which of his 4th slot skills you choose, you're probably going to end up with a better choice than the other 2 gentlemen I've already mentioned here. So as we run into the stats, we'll be talking about this ship versus the field, and I will make sure to point out the many ways that the Fubuki is superior to the Shinonome along the way. For survivability, the Shinonome comes with exactly the same hit points and armor pool as the Fubuki. This is a little on the low side for Tier 5 destroyers, but there are several more delicate destroyers out there. In this case, if you choose to gamble with your life, the extra 10% reduction of hit points from Fragile Threat will probably ensure that you are the least healthy destroyer in most of the games you play, but maybe that's worth it for you for about 200 meters of concealment. In terms of artillery, you come with the same 3 gun mounts. These are actually technically not turrets because they're not armored, each mounting 2 127mm guns. They'd shoot out to 10.3 kilometers, which is 100 meters further than the lowest of the destroyers at this tier. They reload every 9 seconds, and if you hit, you'll probably do some fraction of 1800 points of HE shell damage. That's exactly average for the tier. You could shoot AP as well, but those only do an extra 400 damage. And I would probably advise against that since you will incur a bounce chance, and a long reload puts you, in most cases, at a disadvantage for using this. In any case, all of these numbers are the same as what you would see on the Fubuki, meaning it shares the lowest AP DPM, and something very close to, but not quite, the worst HE DPM, and is also tied for the lowest fire chance over time among Tier 5 destroyers. All of that should sound pretty unimpressive, but the Shinonome also has one strange extra disadvantage, and that being the joint slowest turret traverse of any Tier 5 destroyer. This 30-second traverse is exactly what you find on the Gnevny, which is of course everyone's favorite destroyer, and a surprising 12 seconds worse than the Fubuki. Even with Twist and Track, you'll need to throw on another Inspiration or main battery mod, if not both, to get your turret rotation under 20 seconds. My guess is this ship will be popular among folks who think that you should never shoot your guns at all, which is a bit of a gross oversimplification, so maybe not everyone will notice it, but the Shinonome's gun performance often makes it so that the choice is especially pointless, if not out of your hands completely, so the next section's a little bit more important. Torpedoes! And that's why you're here. And depending on your personal preference, these are either a good decision or a mistake. The Shinonome comes with 3 torpedo turrets with 3 tubes each. They will shoot a torpedo out to 8 kilometers, which is fairly average for this tier. They reload at 73 seconds, which is only 5 seconds slower than the T-61, which is the fastest reloading legitimate destroyer at Tier 5, behind only the Lione if you really want to count that ship. The Shinonome's torpedoes do 14,600 damage, which is only a smidge below average. They are very noticeable though, with 1.6 kilometer detection, which should give your target the highest reaction time of any Tier 5 torpedo, unless modified, even though your torpedoes are fairly fast at 63 knots. As a package, this isn't bad, but it does mean the Shinonome has the second highest torpedo damage per minute among her peers. But as a whole, she's more than 5% behind the leader, which is unsurprisingly the Fubuki. For the extreme keen-eyed player out there, you will notice that these stats are exactly what you would expect on the Fubuki's stock torpedoes, with the exception that you get 2 kilometers of extra range on the Shinonome. Versus the upgraded torpedoes on Fubuki, you're trading 3 seconds of reload and 4 knots of speed for another 2 kilometers of range and a pretty beefy extra 1627 damage per torpedo. The Shinonome's AA is pretty nearly worthless. It probably performs better than if you would give me a gallon of whiskey, a blindfold, and a revolver, but not by much. The ship has the shortest AA range, the lowest AA damage per second, and thus the lowest rating among a bunch of destroyers that no one expects much out of anyway. But for comparison's sake, the Fubuki can shoot almost 3 times as far and 4 times the DPM, and no carrier in their right mind would be worried about that. For maneuverability, the Shinonome's handling characteristics are similar to the Fubuki, but worse. At 35 knots, the ships are both on the slow side of average, with somewhat wide 640 meter turning circles. The Shinonome has a 3.2 second rudder compared to 2.5 on the Fubuki. That's not exactly the end of the world, but it does make the Shinonome feel that much more lethargic. When we look at concealment, your visibility by sea is joint best at Tier 5, shared between the Fubuki and Shinonome. Similarly, 3.1 detection from air and 2.3 while firing from smoke is also the best rating for a Tier 5 destroyer, and exactly the same between the 2 Fubuki class ships. Jumping into consumables, we're going into the land of no surprises. Like other Japanese destroyers, you come with your standard 5-second damage control that reloads every 40 seconds, your standard 80-second smoke with 240-second reload, and your standard 8% speed boost that will last you 2 minutes and recharge 3 minutes after that. There are no hidden choices here, and at this point we should just jump into the battle. So jumping into the battle, we're going to be on shards, and I'm going to be in the middle spawn. In the middle spawn is my favorite spawn if I were spawning in a Scharnhorst, or maybe a Hipper. Maybe not the Shinonome, but here we are. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and put our commander up on the screen. Unsurprisingly, we're using Raizo Tanaka. I would highly suggest that this is not the type of ship that you want to surprise people with out-of-the-box thinking on, because really I don't really see what you're going to do with a build that isn't built around torpedoes. This is a torpedo boat. I don't know what to tell you. If you want this ship, you probably know exactly what you're getting into, and it is doing what I'm doing right now on screen, which is just launching a whole bunch of angry fish at the enemy team. In this case, I am launching a whole bunch of angry fish without jumping into that cap. Reason for that is because I'm not particularly interested in drawing a lot of attention to the fact that I am a terrible gunboat, and I am also here. If they look at who's in the game, they can see I'm a terrible gunboat. They don't know that I'm here, though. So we're going to play it a little bit quiet. We're going to try to not die too quickly. In this case, this Alba is really, really aggressive. We have turned around and kind of started to run away. We tried our opening gambit. It didn't really work. That said, we do have some friendlies. They're kind of strolling into the cap, and I feel really bad about abandoning them, so I'm going to turn back in. As you can see, I'm still spotted. I'm not happy about this. This is a thing that I would probably notice. Maybe. It's hard to say. But we're going back into B. At this point, there's no hiding the fact that I'm here with my terrible gunboat destroyer. You can see we're watching those turrets turn. You might need to speed up the replay in order to see that happen, but they are in fact turning. We have our torpedo reloads up. The one thing that the Shinonome does pretty well is get her torpedoes back in the ready status on the quick. That said, I'm not sure if 3 seconds is really worth losing 1,500 points of damage, and I'm not sure that losing 2 kilometers of range is worth 4 knots. Opinions may vary there, but that's just where I'm at. Moving into this gap, you can see some torpedoes have been shot, probably not blindly at me, probably at somebody behind me. We spot them a little bit early for our friends on our team. But now we're sitting in a cap that is occupied by somebody else. I would bet you dollars to donuts that the destroyer that is in this cap is just a little bit to the left, or, you know, to the east, and hiding behind this island. So we're not feeling super good about this. You can see we're trying to maneuver our ship to get our torpedoes out there. We have kind of awkward torpedo angles, but it's nothing surprising. They're basically Fubuki torpedo angles. We do get those torpedoes out there. You can see I'm kind of judging what kind of real estate do I have, because I need to make this turn. We have been spotted. For a second, I think the guy has come around the corner. He has not. Instead, we have the Fubuki. He can see us because he managed to pass within 5 kilometers, which is my current detection range. We open up against him, and in the meanwhile, we score a torpedo hit in the background, so that's kind of cool. Now we're going to turn around and we can watch again. That front turret is going to take forever. Even our back turrets can't really track with how we're turning the ship, which is not great. I go ahead and take a long-range shot on that Byron. We use the shell follow cam view, which is available on preset number 1 and 2. I use preset 2 to follow our shells in there. It looks like he's just about to get behind the island. We're going to hopefully get our shells reloaded and shoot him in time. Doesn't quite happen because we're still a little bit more concerned about the Fubuki. Now, the Fubuki is one ship that I am not nearly as scared engaging as long as I have my guns faced in the right direction, because I know he has pretty miserable DPM just like me, and if he's making good decisions in terms of how to play the Fubuki, there's a decent chance he's also got really terrible reload speed. Fubuki offers you a lot more options in terms of what do you want to do with your build, because if you did want to try to run the Fubuki as a gunboat destroyer, I would say that you're still probably not making a great decision, but you're making a better decision than you would be with this particular ship. Anyway, we've got our torpedoes up again. We have launched 2 sets on the Byron. The Pensacola looks like he's converging on the Byron. He might be speeding up. He might be dead, though. We kind of put it in front of him, expecting that he will move towards them. The Byron, however, is also converging in that direction. Again, we're going to follow these torpedoes in there. I'm kind of thinking, how far to the left of the screen do these actually go? Oh, shoot. He disappeared. But there you go. We do manage to land a torpedo, which is pretty okay. And we are slowly capping a base. We see that we are just about to run out of the cap, so we actually release our turn there so that we hit the island and stay inside of the boundaries. Call that a semi-intentional knot, sir. But we have captured the base at long last. We dodged some friendly torpedoes. I'm not sure if those are meant for me in particular or if they were just a widespread. But we dodged the torpedoes that weren't going to do any damage to us and that we were completely unaware of. Skill, I know. There's the Fubuki. He has made his way out to the north and west. We put some shells out on him. This is, again, one of those situations where I am happy to trade. Please do note, though, as I am trying to shoot this guy, that anytime that I am turning while aiming, if I do more than just the smallest amount of course correction, my turrets are so slow that I can't even track him at this range. So it's kind of a problem. Thankfully, the HP advantage has allowed us to triumph. He doesn't have any torpedoes left, so we're going to go ahead, put out that fire, make our turn. Nobody else can see us. There are 3 ships left on both sides. We have 2 caps, and at this point, what we want to do is not screw this up. So while I do want to play still kind of aggressively, so I think the cruiser is further south, and I think the battleship is kind of near A. There's the Furataka. It looks like it's actually turning out, which is good for me. He might try to go back into A and defend it. Still, I have probably enough speed and probably enough range advantage in terms of detectability that I can still sail towards A with a certain amount of confidence. The other thing is, with that New York out there, I've only got 9.2 kilometer range on my torpedoes. That's all due to Torpedo Safari, and that's why I would suggest running Torpedo Safari. If you think about it, I've got about 4.2 kilometers worth of stealth torpedo launch range, which is okay. It's okay. It's definitely usable. I still don't think it's worth 3 seconds, and I still don't think it's worth 1,500 points of damage, even with the 4 knots. But it's okay. We were thinking we were going to launch off of the other side of our ship. we're not going to do that. We're going to go ahead and put all of this fun out into the water. 3 tightly packed sets of torpedoes. Those should give him little option unless he completely slams on the brake or turns out or turns in or some combination of that. But we're going to go all the way around. We're not a really good turning destroyer, as you can kind of see. This ship feels heavy to me when I play it. I'm used to run and gun type destroyers. So this ship feels it feels very, very cumbersome. Still, in terms of run and gun, I am not opposed to shooting people in a Japanese destroyer. We're going to pass behind these rocks here, and I think I'm going to pass behind the rocks before he can see me. There we go. We've lost our spot. Oh, now he fires. Shoots a little bit behind us. It's probably a tough shot. And there we go. We have started a fire. This is just blind luck because there's nothing really helping me. And like I said, you do have the lowest fire starting chance of any destroyer at this tier. It's even worse since I am using a whole bunch of torpedo abilities that do not really help my gun performance. Now he is burning, and I am jumping into A. There we see some more torpedoes. We're going to very slow motion dodge those. But, I mean, at this point, I would be foolish to come any closer than 8 kilometers from that for Ataka. You can see he has really low hit points, and he dies. And then we win the game. So, closing thoughts on Shinonome. This ship isn't particularly well regarded on PC, though it does have one advantage there over the Fubuki, and that is that the PC Fubuki only has 2 turrets. There, the disastrous turret rotation could be justified as a trade-off for having 50% more firepower. Here, it just felt like she got transferred over without anyone giving her any love, or even a second thought, really. Just a filler for the Tier 5 premium loot box, so that the whales had a reason to throw money at this anniversary treasure hunt event. Now, I've been pretty hard on this ship, and I will say that if I pulled this ship out of a Tier 5 loot box and I had none of the Tier 5 ships, it's by far not the worst ship on that list. But like the Makarov, it's a ship that doesn't have really much of a purpose, because you can already play a better version of this ship for free. And in this case, unlike the Makarov, which does have some fringe benefits over the Nuremberg, the Makarov also does have one of the best looking camos in the entire game. Shinonome just has Fubuki's permanent camo. Now, really, it's actually more that the Fubuki has Shinonome's camo, but anyway, the point here really is that this is just a clone and an inferior clone. I'd say it offers very little of value to the game other than maybe the historic section of this review. Unless or until they give it one advantage over the Fubuki, like maybe half a knot of speed or something minor like that, then I just don't really see much of a purpose for it. But, as you guys know, I don't really love Japanese torpedo boats. I think they're kind of boring, though I know they have many fans. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the Shinonome. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and as always, I hope to see you on the next one.